Good evening, Monadnock region, and welcome to another, I think this is 3 in a row, special bonus episode of Go Mo Tonight, the Monadnock region's only weekly, and I guess now in some cases twice a week, local interest comedy podcast. And tonight, for this special episode, of course, I'm your host, Chris DiLoretto. I'm joined in the Space Lounge by my co-host,
Zoe Roten-Heinsman.
and we together are joined by a very special guest, none other than the insurgent candidate for the Hillsborough 33 district of the New Hampshire House of Representatives, representing Peterborough and Sharon, Shannon, whatever that fiefdom is called.
Oh no, Sharon, that's beautiful.
Shannon, yeah, I know you can't agree with that, but and running in the Democratic primary, which is next Tuesday, 9/13. Get out and vote down at the Peterborough Community Center. Jonah Wheeler. Jonah, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for having me, and thank you, Zoe, too. I'm really happy to be here. Sharon is a very beautiful town. I was just canvassing there on Monday, and
it is
Sunday. We had a very good time. I swear to God, I love the houses there. Yeah, it's full of all that good stuff, and yeah. No, I really appreciate you having me on. I'm not sure how insurgent I am, but I am happy to be a candidate in the Democratic primary for the State House. I'm running because I've lived in this town my whole life, and I know that we're in a pretty chaotic moment in our state. I mean, the people in office just gave our money to religious schools, passed an abortion ban of 24 weeks, which also calls for the prosecution of doctors, and money has a big part to play in what's going on with our electricity rates, with Sununu's donations from the utilities commissions, et cetera. And then there's also a crisis of confidence, I think, in leadership. I don't think people really feel, even though there are good people up there, that those good people are working for them and are in community. And I think we need people. No, go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, that sounds a little insurgent to me.
Okay.
But
I'll take it.
Else. No, to be clear, I'm not. I despite my reputation out there, everyone, I'm not trying to stoke any drama or spin a narrative here. This is actually a very friendly campaign that has been conducted, in my opinion, in very good faith between the three candidates, and so in that sense, I did not. Jonah is an insurgent, though, regardless of the tone of any of this, because his opponent. So it's three candidates running for two seats, and he's running against the two incumbents, and they are both longtime incumbents, right? Decade plus, at least, right?
Ivy's been in there for 8 years, and Peter's been in there for 22 years now.
Okay, so between the two of them, 30.
Yeah. Long time.
Yeah, long time. And so, and again, like I said, we, many of we hosted, along with the library, the Peterborough Parlay 2 last week, and which was, I thought, a fantastic discussion, and in some cases, actual debate between the three candidates, and very substantive, the case where no one was just giving rote answers. I think everyone, took positions and gave comprehensive and thoughtful answers, and were thoughtful with each other as right. well as with us, the moderators. And I thought that was great. And so it's been very nice to see. But what was the impetus for your candidacy here? What brings you to the debate floor?
Well, we do have two good candidates for this election, two good state representatives who are currently in office. I'm running against them because I think that out of 400 people, at least one of them should represent the working class people in this state, the minority groups who have no voice in the legislature, the young people who have no voice in the legislature right now. I mean, I've lived the experiences that all the people in our state are going through right now, the experiences which are being directly impacted by the legislation which the Republicans and others have passed throughout the decades. And I think that having that firsthand experience in the legislature, talking to those people and organizing community across the state, that's actually how we're going to be able to build a base of people that's going to go out and change this state. And I think our two current representatives are not doing that right now. I know that. So, however, they're a good vote, but we need more than just a good vote. We need energy and some people who are going to do everything that they can, run everywhere that they can, not just here in Peterborough, to make sure that we take back the State House, but also when in the office, listening to the communities across the state. And that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years. And I think I'll be able to do that even better in the state legislature. So
can you tell us a little about what you have been doing over the past 6 years and how that informs this campaign?
Absolutely. Well, I started out as a really apathetic kid in politics after.
I don't believe you.
No, right? Yeah. Well, I was after the Trump election. I kind of had my hands up after the primary in 2016, and after Trump won, from a number of things, and I got more politically involved, but even more apathetic, definitely. More politically aware. I was reading a lot more, but more politically apathetic as I read more. Then one day, my mom saw Heather Stockwell at the grocery store, and she pulled my mom aside, and said, "I'm gonna organize your son." And then next thing I know, I'm at house parties.
I'm gonna organize you.
I'm gonna organize you. No, well, she's that's the power of Heather Stockwell.
I know Heather. Yeah, no, I'm not surprised actually.
She will pull you right in.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the beauty of Heather, for sure, and she
Yep.
does it well.
Yep.
And she sort of mentored me along the way. And next thing I knew, I was canvassing and going to house parties and volunteering, and we were in lines then the presidential campaign started, and we were at lines and rallies. And do you support Medicare for all? Are you ready for a healthcare night where we can tell stories and all that stuff? And it's looked like a number of different things. I've done healthcare justice work, immigration justice work, wage justice work. I've fought the fight for the working class over the last 6 years alongside some really tremendous organizers who are doing the real work on the ground here in New Hampshire, work which doesn't get written about in the news because of the lack of local journalism, as we've all talked about. And there is a serious movement brewing, a real serious people who are fighting and doing things every day. They're still doing things every day. And they don't have any representation in the State House. And I've seen that going to the State House the last two sessions. Well, first session in 2020 was a Zoom session, but in the last session, I was at the State House almost every full session day, and I was there a lot of the committee days to organize people to go out and testify on legislation, testifying myself. I think sort of my proudest accomplishment was helping bring 500 people to testify on 1255, which was the divisive concepts legislation. And people told their stories. They told us why telling history was important, why making sure that real history was taught is important, in the full context of the events that happened in history was important, not just painting the United States in a positive light. And their stories were very powerful. Those are on YouTube, I'm sure, somewhere, and you can all find them. But that's what that's looked like. It's looked like going to the Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield building in Manchester in the summer of 2020 and 2021, bringing people to tell their stories about what Anthem has done to them right in front of the building, and making it clear to the people who have perpetrated what can only be described as crimes against these people, the effects of what those crimes have done, and how it's affected those people. And it's been very direct and very intense ways. People are very affected by it. I mean, the statistics that were brought up in 2016 about the wealth gap, healthcare, etc., have only gotten worse. And I think our response to those statistics has sort of diminished. But what we've been doing here on the ground has been trying to keep that response up and keep the movement going, because the stories continue to need to be told. it's not we're not going to change the world in a day, but we have to build those relationships. And over the last 6 years, I've been trying to build those relationships and bring people out to tell their stories, whether it's at Anthem or in a Zoom call or at the State House, and that has been really informative in how where we're at here in New Hampshire politics and actually how we can move forward. I mean, we've seen it in Croydon, we've seen it across the board. I saw it with 1255, bringing people together to tell their stories about what's actually happening so we can connect on some common ground and find some principle is actually how we're going to move forward.
Yeah. I have a couple of follow-up questions, based on what you just said. The first is, this is especially good because once in a great while we have a stray listener come in who isn't from the area, right? But I also think that this is useful for people who are right at home because actually a lot of people don't understand this sort of thing. And now, little known facts, like Zoe and I used to be activists and organizers as well. And, there's a lot that's unique in New Hampshire in contrast to, say, most activists and organizers are in more urban areas, right? And I think that there are ways of organizing and everything from methods to like infrastructure that exists, like communication networks and in neighborhoods and things like that, that make it different, and make the way that you approach that sort of thing in urban places, whether we're talking about Boston, Worcester, Brooklyn, Philadelphia, it doesn't matter. New Hampshire's different. It's different because it's rural, and it's different because we have a lot of weird quirks. What can you talk about that a little bit from your perspective, both from your experience as well as like looking forward, right? In terms of like, how does that impact the approach and the emphasis and like what you go after in terms of policy and activism and all that?
Well, New Hampshire is a really unique political state. For me, I think it represents a really unique opportunity. I think a lot of people see that, even people who are on this, quote unquote, other side see that opportunity as well. It's more than just a purple state. I think it has like really unique political views that allow it to be. I talk to my friends sometimes, and when I'm ranting, I say we can be the bedrock of the revolution. We can be the first domino to fall in the United States to really make it a serious. Say that again.
I've heard it said before.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, that makes me hopeful that I'm not the only one talking about it.
The only one. Probably the most credible one to say it, but
I don't know about that. I mean, I'm sure people have said it, but in the perspective of we got to stop it. But I think that a couple of things have proved that to me. I mean, Bernie Sanders won both times. I think even up against what he was up against in 2020, he still won again. With 19 other candidates in the election, and that to me shows it has nothing to do with who Bernie is. We can debate that person to the end of the earth, and I'm sure a lot of people will. But it has more to do with the fact that what he represented to a lot of people was the political revolution, the full-throated, full-visioned leadership to take a scattered base of people who do agree, organize them, and then actually change the world. And I think that what can be done here in New Hampshire is that energy still exists, that want for that new world still exists. And what's unique about New Hampshire is even though we're rural, even though we're sort of split up, we have this very odd sense of community, this old hippie network, which has to be tapped into, and I think can be tapped into on a level which is not paralleled in any state, this sort of hometown hippie network. And that, I think, can really be powerful when you're talking about an organized political movement, which is trying to accomplish something that working class people have been trying to accomplish for centuries, living under multiple different styles of economic systems, whether it's feudalism or capitalism, and that is actually meeting the basic human rights which we all are entitled to. I think in this moment we're up against a lot. It's easy to be a doomer, but I also think that we have the greatest opportunity for that new world that any people in the history of the world have ever had. And I think New Hampshire being in the place that it is in the world, with the people that it is in the world, actually does represent the opportunity to be that first domino that falls and starts this new train of thought in humanity that actually is recognizing our inherent rights for freedom and life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness for all and everyone in it. I think, to me, that's what I don't know if I could speak a lot about the specifics about organizing stuff, but I think that overall that the uniqueness of New Hampshire represents that first domino.
Yeah, and to that point, and also, coupled with the fact that I think that both, the Sanders campaign, which you mentioned, and in other ways, and for other people, the Trump campaign, they both represented, sort of insurgencies, right? And they, for various reasons, and coming from many different directions, people felt that both of them, represented perhaps a different way of doing things, however true, right? And well, I think probably undeniably true in both cases, honestly. Different, different. Not the mainstream, not following the script, right? And then you reference things like an abortion ban, laws that curtail free speech, like a divisive concepts bill, and then things that happened in Croydon, where they sort of like voted out their school district, right? All of this together forces people to be able to discuss things at their most basic level, right? To the extent that we have a civic discourse at all, right? And one of the things that we support very openly at Goldman Adnock as a whole is the resurrection of a more robust civic discourse. And one of the things that like I've encountered from you both in the debate last week and in conversations that we've had is that you're not just willing, but you're prepared to do things differently and to have those conversations at like the most basic level where we're arguing the merits of free speech, right? Where we're arguing, should abortion be legal? Should we have public schools and why? So I want to give you the opportunity to talk about the future, right? Regardless of whether New Hampshire is that domino, and regardless of even this individual campaign, right, or this individual race, right? What in your mind could happen, right? What's a way that we could, people like yourself, and perhaps if there's others out there, or even antagonists that together, could form a dialogue, right? What does that look like to you in a different form of politics in the next 10 to 20 years in this state?
Well, I think we got to get off social media for one. I think we got to get into person as much as we can, whether that's in a park or in the library or something like that. And then I think redefining, it's been done a couple of times, but when, what do you define as a conservative? What do you define as a liberal? Don't default the conversation to these, the labels that make it so easy to write someone off or say that I'm not going to listen.
You can't just say like, what does it mean to be a liberal? Well, I'm a Democrat. You know exactly. What I mean? You shouldn't say that. You shouldn't answer that question that way.
You should have to answer that question. And you should have to think about what it means. It is not just for the other person. It is for you as well. It's for critical thought and to really analyze where you are and what do you believe? What do you believe as a person in this world? And how far are you willing to go to bring forth that world. Those are serious questions. Or what does that world look like and all this stuff? I mean, I don't think we even have those fundamental conversations. And sort of, as I talked about in the debate, I think just listening sessions, coming together, talking as a community, as a state, as a country, on the serious issues. And I think bringing back critical journalism is a very crucial part to this, making sure the sensationalization of the mainstream media and how it reports on the news. And I mean, there were on the ground reporters in the food factories during the pandemic talking about talking to workers who were working 16-hour days, and people who had seen people die on the shift and pass out while boxing the food to make sure that we all had it in the pandemic. And those stories were not told on the mainstream media. There's a whole there's a whole sector of the population, the working class, whose stories and struggle is not made aware. The rest of the population is not made aware of those struggles as a result of the lack of local journalism and critical news that is actually trying to challenge power and expose what it sees to be corruption, as I think we once had here in the United States. I do think that's a big piece of what's happened here. I think we've lost a lot of critical journalism because of the lack of resources. And then that makes people unaware of what's going on in their world. And I think that when people are only getting their news from social media, where it's all sensationalized, it's all just headlines. I think there's been a couple of stories where people don't even click on the headlines. They read the headline and they say, oh, that's it right there. We're living in a soundbite culture. And I think as much as we can in the next 10 or 20 years to get out of the situation that we're in, we have to get into a real intellectual culture where we're debating and discussing these issues. However that looks, I don't know, but I think it has to stop being sound bites. It has to stop being, playing for clicks and playing for claps. That's hard, but I think you can play for claps and still be principled. You can play for claps and still have a mission that's more than just I want to be on top, and I want to be the biggest man in the room, whether it's for politics or business or whatever. And these are big cultural questions, but I think eventually, just by simply listening, we can really start to chip away at some of these big cultural questions and deal with some of the systemic issues that are in our culture. I mean, Martin Luther King talked about in 1960 how he saw the United States as a sick society, or a society on the beaten path to hell. That was 60 years ago, or that was 55 years ago. We're in a much worse situation right now, and I think that if we're not, how much farther is this path? Because I'm a little bit worried. I think if we don't turn course too much sooner and start having these conversations, then the beaten path will end and we'll fall off the cliff. I think that America is a sick country. That'll be a soundbite, I'm sure. But I think that America is a sick country.
Out and be like,
yeah, right, exactly. Ivy and Peter are already on the editing. It's okay, but I think America, the country, is sick. The people are being affected by that sickness. There's a cancer that's on our government, and it's keeping us from really moving forward. But listening, I think, is how we're actually going to deal with the next 10 and 20 years, and how we can start to chip away at all those questions. That was a big answer. I apologize.
It was a big question.
Big question. Yeah. I think. I think it's coming to the point where it's become apparently necessary again, and I think that wasn't true for a long time. Several decades really, because you had I think that there was the sense after, like the end of history, Soviet Union falls and all that, where we don't really have to relitigate, why we believe much of anything, because, there's sort of, one path forward, and we're doing it. And, you don't need, and then ever since, like, say, like 9/11, right? Events have just perpetually kept everyone off balance. And I think that throughout that 20-year period, there has been, I think this will be recognized later on by historians, but I think that there has already been some pretty major political realignments within the parties, which happened in the 1960s, and not a lot since then. But I think that some of that has happened and is probably still happening. And some of that is tied to the fact that people are, I think people are going, well, people are going in two different directions. They're either going in a partisan direction where they're following a realignment out of loyalty, I think, to a party banner, right? Or they're switching, or they're thinking in about other things because they are questioning what they believe, and or they're answering those questions, and it's putting them in a different place than where they think they might be. And I do think that the more we talk and listen, the more.
What do you see as the realignment that's happened?
What's that?
What's the realignment that's happened? Do you see?
Well, I think that for sure in the last 20 years, I mean, this is a trend that was going on before then. Certainly, began in the 80s. The seeds were planted. Came of age with Bill Clinton and the DLC. But the base of the Democratic Party has very much become, basically upper middle class, middle managers, white collar, college educated, and in fact, in a lot of cases, postgraduate degreed people. It is, what the late Barbara Ehrenreich would have called the professional managerial class. Is and that does extend really from kind of low level college degree engineers, say, to, in a lot of cases now, CEOs. Which, if anybody, nobody remembers, but if anybody remembers, even the Bush administration, right? It was most common both in finance and industry for these CEOs to be affiliated with Republicans. Now, of course, they all, double deal, and they go to both sides. But there is a prevailing mainstream that once might have belonged, at least in part, to Republicans, that is now pretty firmly on the Democratic side. And you have, I mean, most working class people don't vote, so it's a mistake to say that they've all gone over to Trump. I don't think that's accurate. Some have, but I think that especially in places like New Hampshire, Republicans have certainly picked up some of that working class vote that, like, certainly 40 years ago they would not have
had. I definitely agree with that. I think we can get them back, but I think that we've lost them for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you'd have to be a real independent Democrat and not be playing to that present day base, I think, is what it would come down to.
True that.
And, I hate to say it, but present day base, people of Peterborough,
you're going to get me in trouble, Chris.
I know, I'm sorry. I said it, I didn't make Jonah agree. But people of Peterborough are in that base of the Democratic Party.
They are. But I think the people of Peterborough know that.
Yeah, for sure. And they can perhaps transcend that label. I do think people are not bound by these demographic, and class oriented and subclass strata, whatever. It's probably some communists listening to this being like mad at characterizations here. But that's what we like to do. And I just want to make a comment for the benefit of any just general listeners out there, though, that in terms of, I certainly agree with Jonah with respect to the state of journalism. And while we will never have the resources on our, $0 budget here at Go Monadnock to actually fill the hole of journalism itself, we what we strive to do instead is to be a hub for those ideas, and a hub for people to discuss them and to put them forth and to have them magnified, especially those that are different and especially those that are willing to relitigate those kind of fundamental first principles of like, who are we, what are we trying to do, and why, and then from there, how do we do it, right? Those are we welcome that. So I mean, that includes events that we intend to put on in the future, but it also means that like if you see yourself in that category, whatever side of the aisle or flavor you might find yourself in, we welcome contact from you. Please reach out to us. We are always looking for, we have plans regardless of how this primary goes to, harass Jonah to like write for us from time to time, because, he is one of those people willing to and enthusiastic about having those types of conversations. So I think it's
very. You won't have to harass me too much. I'll write for
you. Yeah, I was gonna say I didn't think it would be hard.
I'm not Peter. I do have an iPhone, so I actually am available.
See, now you're taking
shots. He'll appreciate that. He knows I'm joking. To be clear. He has a flip phone on purpose. You got to be on a speed dial to really. That's how you know.
That might be a New Hampshire thing too. There's a few of those out there.
I think that is.
They exist.
I praised him for it when he first told me. I was like, "Good, just that the smartphone is terrible. I think you keep the cell phone, keep the He has a computer. He goes on Facebook sometimes. He peruses.
It's a little terrible. It is. I don't think I'll ever get rid of it, but it's a little terrible.
It's terrible. No, I'm never keeping. I mean, I'm gonna have the smartphone until I die, I think.
Yeah, we're stuck with it, but it was probably better before. Well, now you can't go back. You can't go back.
You'll never know. Progress is progress.
Yeah, it is. It just goes. It just goes forward.
There's one direction. It's one direction.
Speaking of progress, Zoe, I don't know if do you want to take our last question?
How do we want to phrase it so that Jonah will answer it?
Well, I mean, so this is something that we really probably should have done in our discussion with Sarah, and I don't know if it pertains to the executive director of Monadnock Music so much.
Should have asked anyway.
We should have asked anyway. We haven't done it in a couple of things, but we've talked to several of our special guests about this in the past. But now, no one's asking you to say anything bad about Sharon, of course, even though I will joke about it being a fiefdom and stuff. We're not talking about Sharon specifically, but one might think of it as a bit of an example, right? But like, so we know, right? I mean, I don't think you're a person. Actually, so far nobody has been, actually, which is funny. But I definitely don't think you're a person who has to be. It was super difficult to convince that it's very possible that over the next decade or two, things like political organization and like even things like centralized federal power and like who the hell knows what else might change. They might not be, and just as they've changed in the past, they've changed throughout the history of our nation, the history of New Hampshire, right? Forms of government evolve in different ways. But oftentimes abruptly and not usually over time, right? So it is possible that we may see some kind of changes, right? We may see a breakdown in central authority, whether that's let's just posit that that's one change that could happen, right? And that could be from the federal side, and it could also be from the state side, which as in New Hampshire, we don't have home rule. Every town and municipality is basically just a subsidiary of the state of New Hampshire, but that could change, right? In a situation where we see this breakdown of the existing authority and everything like that, like it may be that larger entities, like let's say Keene, right, as an example, might like a town like Peterborough, which is in my mind an independent cultural entity in its own right, it might come under the sway, like against its will potentially, of something like a Keene, which to me, I think that's not a good idea personally. But Other people believe that an alternative to this would be Peterborough proactively
taking over the other towns,
some of its neighbors, so as to form a regional bloc that might be formidable against
I'm
that.
so glad I'm not the only one thinking about this.
Okay, see, that's what I'm saying. No, yeah, so what do you think about that? And like, what could happen there?
Well, I think if there was a breakdown in the centralized powers, and somehow there was not a threat of military force coming in and taking over Peterborough, and there was some sort of Mad Max-like scenario, I don't think it would be totally Mad Max. I think places like New Hampshire would. Places like New Hampshire, we would still be Peterborough. People would want to go to Harlow's and stuff, and so I mean, I have a hard time believing that people would just immediately go crazy and chaotic. I think if we did it right, if we told Hancock that they'd be able to come in. But the thing is, I think Peterborough would have to accept that we'd have to partly become a little bit more urban in that scenario, because we'd be much more central. So that would be the hard thing there. But also people could spread out to the other town. I feel like there's some, give and take that could happen there, but it would all have to be called the Greater Peterborough region. That's the only thing. We'd have to convince Troy, or not Troy, that'd be going to Keene. We'd have to convince Jaffrey, Ringe, Temple, all to be now called the Greater Peterborough region.
Yeah, Temple's a hot button subject because they supposedly would resist having any such. Yeah, that's what I've been.
Well, I mean, maybe that could be the line. Use Temple Mountain as the line.
They see themselves as on the other side of the mountain. That is kind of their position, but
I think it'd be possible.
Yeah, it's possible, and then that really begs the question of like, what's the relationship with Milford? Because we would probably want like a friendly, some kind of rapport.
Well, we have to choose Milford or Keene. Which one do we want to be?
Exactly, and I think that Milford would be willing to not try to annex us. You know what I'm saying? Whereas Keene would want to annex us, right? We could form an alliance, I think, with Milford.
And then be more sort of a block. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be separate blocks. Yeah.
I mean, the War of Manchester and Concord, I think we'll just leave that be.
We will. We'll try to stay over here. Exactly.
We'll stay over here. Don't go farther than Ringe, because then we get into the mass wars, Fitchburg and Lowell and all these crazy things.
One of the things I was complaining to Zoe about is that, one of my pet things that I talk about, right? And this is, what I was saying specifically was that, like, people like to talk about things like, and I won't make you take a position on this, don't worry. But people like to talk about things like public transportation, or like some kind of public transportation in the Granite State and things like that, right? But I can't think of any possible public transportation project that could happen in the Granite State that would actually be of greater economic benefit to, frankly, both the working class and ultimately the capitalist class as well, than a proper east-west highway that goes actually from Vermont to the coast, which we don't have. We have north-south highways that sort of go nowhere, like 91. It's like a road to nowhere unless you're going to New York City, right? And it, so that's all the interstate system gave us. And I believe someone once told me that part of the reason for that was because the interstate system was designed with, the military troop movements in mind, and they didn't actually want to make the New Hampshire coast friendly enough to like a potential invasion, and could then come in. I don't know how true that is, but in any case, in the scenario that we're talking here, it's actually an advantage, because it would, the whole Concord, Nashua, Manchester wars or whatever goes on there, they're more likely to leave us alone, because it's just, frankly, kind of a pain in the ass to deal with.
It is. It's, it's rough roads. 101.
We have choke points too. Like we could shut down 101 in various
Temple Mountain. That's that's the other thing. Peterborough could defend itself, even if it's just Peterborough. 101, 202 both ways, and then 101 the other way, and that's easily defendable.
You've got Ringe down on 119,
right,
and 12 down there.
That's like,
I think about this a lot.
50 guards, 50 to 100 guards tops. That's not a lot of salary.
Small force, small force.
With our combined police budget in all these towns, I think we could meet the salary needed for the guards and military to keep this running. And I think we have enough housing. We would be able to sort of eminent domain some of these lands. I'm kidding. That was a joke for all these people.
All right, but
no eminent domain.
Yes, but seriously, as we wrap this up, is as we are over
This is
time.
never going to
Great
happen. I
conversation.
support the United
But
States of America.
yeah, no, I know, but I don't. I just look. I don't want to. I don't want to like tip my hand or be controversial or anything like that. But I don't know. I mean, don't you guys find the idea of? I mean, and I say this to the broader listenership. Like, don't you guys find the idea of being represented by someone who understands all of that attractive? I think it's attractive, anyways. And if you
just in case it happens, right?
just in case, that's what I mean. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I want my representative to know the score.
Right.
These are things that I think we should.
You got to be ready on day one to unite the towns.
You're right. No learning on the job,
No learning on the job. Be ready on day one to unite the towns.
As you said at the beginning, these are dire times. You got to be ready.
Right. We'll take secession back from the Free State. We'll make it our own thing, and then we'll just
absolutely.
We'll make it progressive cessation for Peterborough and the greater Peterborough area.
And it may be forced upon us as well. It may not even be a thing that we declare. It may be a de facto
which would be even better.
Exactly. So if any of you out there agree,
get prepared.
Next Tuesday.
Tuesday, and I will say this, just on a serious note, next Tuesday, we do have a choice. You have two people that you can choose to be your representatives. I've been out in community this entire summer, taking no breaks, no vacations, no nothing, and I've been building a base of people to go out. We actually have a shot at bringing some real energy, real vision to Concord. If I lose, I'll be trying for the other candidates, but we vote for Peterborough. I think I'm the only candidate in this election who actually has the energy and vision to go out and build a movement of the people in this state to actually build a new state. We have people who vote well, but we need people who are going to do more than just vote well. We need representatives and public servants who are going to go out and build community. If I lose this primary election, it doesn't have to be through a representative. I'm sure with Chris and Zoe and all the people here in Peterborough, we will continue to build community. But I think as a representative and in Concord, I will be able to do that much better than anyone could. And I'm getting a knock at the door, so I got tripped up. But that is my spiel. I'm running for the community.
Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. We're going to put this out on Thursday, so it'll be out several days before the election for people to view. Hopefully it gets shared widely. I really appreciate your time and that you have taken the time to run for office.
Well, I appreciate you having me, Chris. And, we'll keep trying. We'll keep trying. We got to keep the community together for that event. That's the last thing I'll say about the.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That's absolutely.
We can't be a divided Facebook community if we're going to be coming together.
No, that is absolutely true, and and I say that as a Facebook combatant. No,
but I like your.
There may come a time when we do have to set those differences aside. I completely agree.
The Bears will have to be secondary.
They will have to be secondary, guys. But that's another subject. I'll get into that another day. God, there was a post just a couple days ago.
That was one of the best posts that's been about the Bears, though. So.
And I couldn't comment on it because I was on a Facebook ban for something I was innocent for, by the way. Yeah, another story for another time. But yes, this is a great note to end this on. So thank you all for joining us. Go vote in the primary, one of the primaries on Tuesday.
Yeah, whoever you vote for, make sure you vote. That's important.
Yeah, just I've sworn off voting at various points in life, and I still go vote because I just like to vote. I just really like it. It's even if I'm writing people's names in, I want to go and cast that ballot. I'm sure Runyon will be there with his bow tie. You can probably say hi to Bill Taylor. Hopefully, we'll see if my work schedule permits it. Maybe we can get down there and come and say hello to you guys down at the polls.
Good. Well, I'll be there all day. I know Peter will be there a little bit of the day, maybe most of the day. Nice. We'll be holding signs and stuff. So come say hi.
All right. I'm excited to see what happens next. This is going to be cool. Thank you again.
Thank you, Jonah.
It's up to you. Thank you.